Recording has begun. Good evening. This is the October 15, 2024 regular meeting of the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force of the City and County of San Francisco. The time is 5:32 p.m. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and its committees convene in hybrid meetings that allow for either in-person attendance or remote participation. Public comment will be taken on each item of the agenda. Meeting decorum. Any member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force may call for decorum due to the disorderly conduct of meeting participants. Persons who engage in threatening and/or menacing behavior may be asked to leave. Chair Schmidt, that completes my announcements.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to the first item, please.
Item 1. Call to order, roll call, and agenda changes. Shall I take the roll?
Yeah, let's go roll. I'm going to just do a small agenda change.
All right, taking the roll. Chair Schmidt.
Present.
Chair Schmidt present. Vice Chair Stein.
Present.
Vice Chair Stein present. Member Sugarman.
Present.
Member Sugarman present. Three individuals present. We have a quorum.
All right. I just thought the item that's up near the top, I'd prefer that it be at the end, especially today. And it's a sentence that I just sort of threw out there, but I'll explain what I mean by it. And I think we get our two cases done and then we'll move to that item. That is number 4. Yes, Member Stein.
Oh, it was telling me it's number 4.
Oh, thank you. Hi. So let's move 4 behind 5 and 6 and 7. Yeah.
Okay. And we did receive notification from Mr. Petrellis that he has withdrawn item 5, file number 24049.
Yeah, so that number 5 will not be heard. It will be withdrawn. I'm going to have a couple of comments about it, which I'll probably save to the number 4 space. Although anyone who wants to make comments about that, I think there's some things I think we should talk about. Okay. I think we're, members, anything else on agenda changes? Okay. Let's go to number 2 then.
Number 2, approval of the September 17, 2024 Complaint Committee minutes.
Members, any changes? Okay, move to approve the minutes.
I second. This is Member Stein.
Moved by Chair Schmidt, seconded by Vice Chair Stein, to approve the September 17, 2024 minutes. Public comment?
Yes, please.
We're taking public comment on item 2, approval of the minutes. Anyone wishing to make public comment, please approach the podium. Checking the online community. Members of the online community, if you'd like to make public comment, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. I'll give you a moment. We have no one at the podium, no one. Oh, we do have a hand raised. One moment, please. Hello, caller. Would you like to make comment on the minutes?
Yes, hello. This is Michael Petrellis, and I have 2 purposes. One is to say, please approve these minutes, and the other is to say, I'm glad to know I've dialed in correctly from a public library. I'm outside, and I hope the outside noise is not too loud when we get to my item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no other hands raised.
All right, let's vote.
Taking the vote, Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Vice Chair Stein.
Aye.
Vice Chair Stein, aye. Member Sugarman.
Aye.
Member Sugarman, aye. 3 ayes, the motion passes.
Okay, next will be, we can call number 3, public comment.
Item number 3, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. We have no one approaching the podium. We have a hand raised again. One moment, please. Hello, is this Mr. Petrellis?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Petrellis, do you have a public comment on item 3?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, this is Michael Petrellis again. There is a ballot prop for the voters this November that would severely limit the number of commissions in the city. I am against this measure. I fear that the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force would be a commission that some people would want to do away with, and that would really harm local democracy. And I hope in the future that this plea I have made for a number of years, and others have made the plea to the Board of Supervisors, that they will allocate money to broadcast your monthly meetings on SF.gov TV. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no one approaching the podium and no other callers.
Okay. I guess we can move on, and do you want to call 5? I know it's going to be it's been withdrawn. Do we need to call that?
And indicate that it's withdrawn, yes.
Okay,
Would
let's
you
do that.
give me a moment?
Actually, if the matter's withdrawn, we just note that it's withdrawn. We do not need to call it.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Young.
It's no longer in our hands once it's withdrawn.
thank you, Victor.
One moment, please.
I'm sorry. Okay. I just wanted to, from what was just said, our chair said he had some comments he wanted to make on the item. Is it still possible for us to call it?
I don't see any harm in calling it if you'd like.
I just wanted to check. Do you
Okay, let's go ahead then. Yeah, let's call the matter because it's a little bit of an unusual kind of case, and I think there are some things that we may want to just talk about with while we're here in committee on the record.
Okay, so calling item 5.
Yeah, call number 5.
Item number 5, file number 24049. Complaint filed by Michael Petrellis against Andrea Iao, Castro Community Benefit District, for allegedly violating Administrative Code Sunshine Ordinance Sections 67.21 by failing to respond to a records request in a timely and/or complete manner. This matter is called for determination of jurisdiction over the complaint. Determination regarding jurisdiction required prior to scheduling a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force hearing on the complaint pursuant to Administrative Code 67.21, or referring the complaint to the city agency who administers the contract for the Castro Community Benefit District pursuant to Administrative Code 12L for Nonprofit Public Access Ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And so the matter is being withdrawn, but it involved an issue of jurisdiction. And the first thing that I had a concern about is this idea that jurisdiction be looked at in some sort of preliminary form as a preliminary matter, and especially because it seems to me that in this situation, this is an example of jurisdiction is not some kind of a hard and fast, quick procedural rule. It becomes somewhat of a substantive matter. And so whether it be that this committee would be empowered to somehow make a final decision on jurisdiction, or if it be that it may not have even made it to us because somebody like the chair might have been trying to make a decision on jurisdiction without even sending it to a committee. I think that it doesn't make sense to me that could happen. Now, this comes down to something that is subject to some legal analysis. And I think, the members here probably spent a lot of time looking at this because we just found out that the case has been withdrawn. And I think that the issues presented here are almost, I guess you'd say for us at least, somewhat cutting edge because this involved an entity that has both aspects of private status and public status. It is a document request to that entity, and we certainly have access to the city attorney's office on this, and certainly they either have something to say or may have something to say. But if we had heard the matter today, I was going to say that it definitely should be handled by the full task force, whatever. And because I think that this is almost like an existential question for what this task force is supposed to be doing. And so I wish it had not been withdrawn. There's a lot of cases that I don't care if they were withdrawn, but that question in this case, it really sort of struck me as, hey, what are we doing here? And why do we have this preliminary jurisdiction question? And how are we doing these jurisdiction things? Because jurisdiction generally is not an issue that really takes very long. Most cases we have it. But I think that we do need to take very seriously any determination that somehow something is outside the jurisdiction of this task force. I think that in terms of the substantive issue, I wanted to note that it's unclear to me what standard there is that following to determine, quote, jurisdiction. To me, it's sort of like a word that has somehow landed on us and we're using it, but I don't know if we know how to use it. I look at the the ordinance, I look at state law. I don't necessarily find a statement like you do when you're looking at jurisdictional issues in, say, California courts, federal courts. Often, when you're talking about jurisdiction there, you have a clear statement in the law telling you this is a jurisdictional limit of some kind. And I think if we're going to be talking about jurisdiction in some fashion, we want to find the word jurisdiction where it exists. And then also, if there's limits on our jurisdiction, I think we need to find actual language in the law that we need to make it clear that that's how we are limiting ourselves, because I'm frankly not convinced that the jurisdiction restrictions that seem to be maybe in some, prior cases, or maybe in people's minds as to how things should go, especially with these private public situations. I don't know if I'm convinced that we really are not artificially limiting ourselves in what we can be looking at. I'll leave it at that. So that's my comment on a case that we're not going to decide. I may also bring it up at the end of today's calendar, and we'll have a very short calendar, because it sort of also fits within the item that we just moved back, number 4. And I'll explain at that point, when we hear number 4, why I think that fits in.
Mm-hmm.
Members, anything that you want to say about the matter?
Yeah.
Member Stein.
I just want to say also, I spent a lot of time on this, and so I'm disappointed that it was withdrawn, especially withdrawn so late. If it was going to be withdrawn, it would have been nice if it was withdrawn before I spent hours trying to look up, more scholarship on community benefit districts, law around community benefit districts, reading the entire, contract that the CBD had with the city and all of that, because we're just volunteers here, and just a lot of time went into that. But I will say, when I was trying to understand it, I felt like there are some ways in which CBDs could fit into this notion of a policy body. They clearly seem to be entities that involve public money, money raised from the public, from citizens, public organization in partnership with the government, and some control or some operation in public spaces. And for those reasons, I feel like it's so intertwined. I want to err on the side of saying that just because a public-private partnership is created doesn't mean that should then be shielded from what the public can see. But I was also going to kick it to the entire task force, because I felt like this is not a question we can just determine on our own. And I know this has come up earlier in the context of green benefit districts as well. Although I did feel like, based on the contract they gave us, it to me indicates not just that they're supposed to comply with 6724E, but that they're also supposed to follow the CPRA. That was in section 12.2 of their own contract. And then, even though they claim that we as the task force don't have any jurisdiction over the CPRA, there are, I don't have it right in front of me at the moment, but there's a section of our ordinance which basically says that we can look at not only the Sunshine Ordinance, but also the CPRA, and make recommendations accordingly. So I think we have a strong case for having jurisdiction with a CBD. But that's, I feel like, not a matter that we would want to definitively decide in the complaints committee. Yeah, and I realize too that this is kind of a hazy area and probably the only, I don't know that that our perspective would be respected if we made that decision short of a law case or a legal case over it. But I still think in defense of the public's rights to information, I would want to err on the side of being inclusive in these kind of organizations, given that I don't see our jurisdiction barred, and I even actually see it sort of suggested by the documents that were submitted.
I only have one comment, not to add to the complexity and interesting elements of the case, but to at least talk about that I feel as though maybe since March, I can remember, we have been discussing, and I assume for months before I joined the complaint committee, but since I can remember since March, we've been discussing these cases that we have prepared that have also been withdrawn. And so while nothing should be decided at this moment, because I can't imagine having a lot of leeway into figuring out the reason this happened, but we should at least have some control over basically how the calendar is agendized going forward, and to potentially prevent moments like this.
Can we ask, since we have the petitioner here for another case, just for our information, since we are grappling with these issues at a procedural level, why this case was withdrawn and in the 11th hour?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
The petitioner there.
Caller, is this Mr. Petrellis with your hand raised?
Yes, this is Michael Petrellis.
Yeah, this is Member Stein. I just wanted to ask if you might answer the question, why did you decide to withdraw this petition? And also, why did you decide to withdraw it the day before we were hearing it?
Yes, thank you for asking this question. I, out of stress management, after months of battling with the Castro Community Benefit District, having to come to the committee and manage the stress of that complaint, along with my other complaint against the mayor, it was just too much for my stress levels and what I've had to deal with recently with COVID. And yesterday was just not a good energy day for me at all. That said, I did not think to request a delay. After hearing your very thoughtful and constructive comments, I would like to reinstate this matter if I can. And also, if I can't, I could make a new complaint, I imagine. But I would also ask in the future, I should explain my stress management needs and ask that only one complaint of mine be agendized. If you decide to agendize a matter, that it's only one item from me at the meeting. Thank you.
That was helpful to know. Thank you for answering the question.
Well, there is, we do need to, at this point, treat this as having been withdrawn. Just, that's the process. That's the process. I can't really give you advice on how to bring it back up, but I know that there are rules about that the task force has. And maybe if Mr. Petrellis, you want to somehow bring it back up or put it into something new, I don't think we want to give you any discouragement on that if it's within the rules that you can do it. And so, contact the task force. And I think
We are willing to take a resubmission. We'll just have to give it a new file number.
thank you, Victor.
Pretend that
Okay,
we're going to count it as a new complaint
got it.
and go through the process again. But with our low backlog, it shouldn't take any time at all. It's just a
Okay,
matter of who we notify.
great. Okay, thank you. And yeah, we'll see what I think that the request to have only one at a time, that seems to be completely reasonable. The one thing that I want to say is I think one of the reasons we've got two of yours on is because we're trying to sort of bring a new day to this thing and do these things fast. And so these are all there's kind of like someone took a scoop and just grabbed everything we've got that's available this month. And that's what we've got here today. But that doesn't mean that we can't put one back to the next meeting, whether it's this committee or another committee, so that you can concentrate on the one case that you've got here today. And I know we'll see you in a few minutes in that case.
I have a comment also about
Yes.
that. It actually seems potentially reasonable in general, not as a blanket rule, but the idea of limiting the number of cases for one petitioner to bring in a single meeting. However, the one thing that when Mr. Petrella said that sort of like was a little bit of an alarm bell was that these cases are supposed to be resolved in a certain amount of time. So that's something that we have to keep in mind specifically now for Mr. Petrellis, that if he files a case that has like an IDR or an immediate, like any sort of like request timeline, then now we're going to say, someone has to contact him and say, well, we might push out this resolution for a month, essentially, before you hear this second case that you also brought.
We would need to get them to waive the jurisdiction issue on the matter. Maybe if Mr. Petrellis can just state that on his complaint form that in order to have one complaint per meeting, he's willing to waive jurisdiction on his complaint. Waive the timeline for jurisdiction.
The 45-day timeline, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like in this kind of situation, since we have a goal of coming within that 45-day, and we don't want to set up any more obstacles than necessary than hitting that goal. I think that, and I completely, respect Mr. Young's discussion of waiver. We've never talked about waiver, and I'm not 100% convinced, and we don't have to deal with this issue today here, but I'm not 100% convinced that it's a right that it can even be waived. But that's for another time, another day. Just because the word came up, I wanted to mention that. But I think we know how to do this for now, for Mr. Petrellis. Okay, and anything? Members done.
Say, I like the idea of waiver because I feel like the 45 days is for the petitioners. Their right to have it turned around quickly. But if they want to delay something, I would rather have it kind of marked as they waived that privilege. And then at least when we're tallying what we've done in the year, we can see that it's not because of us that it took, 90 days. It's because they were, they wanted to waive it because for whatever reason, they didn't want to have the meeting at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't have myself a real strong opinion one way or another on it. I just think that it's maybe an issue that's not 100% clear. Yeah. Okay, I think we probably covered what hopefully we all wanted to mention on that. And so we don't have any kind of motion because it was withdrawn. So let's go to the next item.
Item number 6, file number 24053. Complaint filed by Ellen Sang against the Planning Department for allegedly violating the Administrative Code, Sunshine Ordinance, Section 67.25, by failing to respond to an immediate disclosure request in a timely and/or complete manner. We have Ms. Sang at the podium. One moment, I will add
Is it
Mr.
okay
Jonas
to-
Ionen.
Is it this? Okay,
We
sorry.
will add, I'll add Mr. Jonas Ionen to the panel. One moment, please. Hello, Jonas. Do I have you on the phone? Jonas, I am unmuting you once again. Jonas.
Hello,
do I
can you hear me?
Yes. One moment, please. Promoting you
Okay.
to panelist.
I'm
Just a
I'm
moment,
driving
please.
over the grapevine, so if I lose you, I'm sorry.
Oh, you have the elevation. Hold on, please. All right.
All right, let's call the matter. Unless you already did, I don't know.
I did.
Oh, you did. Okay, sorry. All right. Because this is a first case hearing, let me explain to the petitioner and to all the parties that we've got a process here whereby we start by hearing from each of the parties. So when our administrator is ready, she'll give you 3 minutes to tell us about your case. Petitioner first, followed by 3 minutes for the responding party. After that,
I'm going to mute you. Getting some background noise.
I guess he's in a convertible. The members of the committee may have questions for the parties. And so there will be a question and answer period. And then after that, we will try to determine what we think should happen with your case. That often involves us looking at issues of, do we have jurisdiction over your case? Does your case involve public records, public agency meetings, et cetera, et cetera? And one of our goals here, we can't make any decisions here because final decisions are made in a separate meeting by the full task force. But we can make recommendations. And so we would send the case to the full task force. That's often what happens. Possibly with recommendations to determine what to do with your case and to see if any orders are appropriate, or sometimes to tell you that we would deny your petition, but we don't know yet. That's what we're going to do here today. So at this time, for this case, when our administrator's ready, we'll hear first from the petitioner.
So once I start your time, you'll hear a chime when you have 30 seconds remaining. You ready to begin? All right. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Can I start now?
Yes, and speak into the mic, please.
It's okay?
Yes.
Good evening, members. On August 14, 2024, I make a Sunshine immediate disclosure request. Request the planning to produce 3 public records. 1, communication between the planner, Michelle Lenny and Mr. Jimmy Chung, PE, regarding 767 North Point Front Gate. 2, Planner Lenny's objection to Mr. Chung's email dated May 9, 2024. I attached the forward emails and other supporting documents. 3, the reason of the objection the planner Lenny gave to Mr. Chung. This email and documents were assigned as page 8, 9, 10, 13, and 14 in agenda packet under item 6. Planning failed to produce any of those public record requests. On August 25, 2024, I sent an email to planning, again request them to provide this public records. I did not receive a response from planning. This email as page 15 is in agenda packet. On September 11, your office sent planning an email request planning to submit its response regarding the allegations, including any and all supporting documents within 5 business days of the notice. This notice as page 21 and 22 in the agenda packet. Within 5 business days should be no later than September 18. Your office confirmed by email dated October 10, 2024 that your office did not receive a response from planning. This is no section of a Sunshine Ordinance that allow planning refusing to comply with the Sunshine Ordinance. Planning doesn't have the discretion to obey Sunshine Ordinance or not. I respectfully ask
30 seconds.
the task force to issue its decision and order determination that planning violated section 67.21 and 67.25 and shall release the document requested within 5 business days from receipt of your order. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And when Ms. Peterson's ready, we'll hear from the respondent.
Mr. Ionin, are you there?
I am.
Are you ready for your 3 minutes to begin?
Sure. I'll keep it pretty brief. We provided all the documents in our possessions to Ms. Tsang related to the subject address and the permit in question. My understanding is she's asking why the planner wrote down something on the back about the gate swinging in or out. And all I can say is the documents, all of the documents and correspondence that are in our possession have been provided to Ms. Tsang. So I'm not sure what else we can possibly do in this matter. That's all.
Okay, all right, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we may have questions for the parties. Members? Yes, Member Stein.
My question is for Mr. Ionin. How and when were the documents provided?
I don't have the dates in front of me. I'm on the road, unfortunately, and they were provided electronically.
From what means? Are you saying they were emailed to the petitioner or they were posted?
Yes,
somewhere?
they were emailed to her.
You know, we don't have a response from you, so we don't have any documentation that documents were emailed or any indication of how you all responded. Is there a reason we don't have that?
I didn't realize it was the 5 days were up, and I didn't realize that it was a requirement to submit something.
Okay. And then, Mike, I also have a question for the petitioner.
If I understand the petitioner's complaint, it's not that she didn't receive the documents. Am I mistaken? She's not suggesting she didn't receive the documents.
I'm not sure. So I have a question for the petitioner. Have you received any response to this particular request
I did
from
not,
the planning department?
sorry. I did not receive the document I requested. It's listed number 1, 2, 3, just like on the page 8 and 9 in my complaint. And then that was sent to the director of the planning. And then
Did you receive an email or anything saying that we have no documents that are responsive to your request?
Yeah, on the August 25th, I even wrote that's on the page.
No, I mean, did you receive an email from the planning department saying that they don't have any responsive
No.
documents to that particular
No,
request?
I even in my email to the director, I said, if you don't have the document, just say so. Tell me the fact you don't have. They did not respond. I have the letter actually, and I think it's 15. Yeah, 15.
No, I saw that in the thing, but I'm just confirming. Okay.
I said, if you don't have any document response for to item 1 or 2 or 3, you should state such fact. No response.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll probably get answered if you go ahead.
Yeah, I guess first to Ms. Sen. So are you saying that with the request that we're talking about here today,
Yes,
you've never gotten anything from the planning department?
not for what I asking them.
Okay, they didn't give you any documents that they said were responding to your request?
No,
Okay, and they never told you anything like, we don't have any documents, or we object in some way?
no.
Okay,
As I told you, my letter emailed to the director on the page 15, your office assigned, that's page 15. I already tell them that if you don't have what I request, just tell me the fact you don't have. They did not respond at all. This is the attitude like today. They're supposed to have a knowledge representative, and now she doesn't even know when and date and all those things. I think that's not acceptable. I take the time off when, I'm senior, sitting here. I mean, they just think that they don't have to comply. There's no consequences.
thank you. I'm going to now ask the respondent. Can you tell me if you're saying that there were documents that were given to Ms. Sang on this request, what was the date that happened?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. Can you describe what documents, what they were, how many pages, the types of documents?
I think they were very limited. I think there were some email exchanges related to this, but the permit was signed over the counter, if I recall correctly. So there's not a lot of documents associated with this particular permit.
Okay. So the number of pages is no more than 10, say.
Minimal, yes.
Minimal. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Our problem is that we just don't see in the record here that we have before us. And I know we're going faster than in the past, but we just don't see that she's received anything.
And just for the record, I believe the planner did have phone conversations with Ms. Sang and explained to her that some of the things that she's requesting are not documents, so we can't provide her with anything.
Okay. Now,
there was verbal communication with Ms. Sang.
I see in the record there's a DBI document. I see they're called Exhibit 2. permanent details report, and that's a page. And then there's a, looks like an inspector, signed a document. I've got that page. And then a third page, which is probably, it's somehow associated with those in our file. It talks about this sunshine request. But I guess, would those first two pages be the types of documents that you're referring to, Mr. Ionin, that you're saying were produced to the petitioner?
Yeah, it sounds like you're referring to the building permit application.
Yeah, exactly. I'll ask the petitioner, the building permit application that I see in the file, and that's in page 14 of our file. Did you receive that before you made this document request, or did you possibly receive it after?
I have a sunshine request with the building department. Those records are from building department, but my asking the planning is different than I asking building. That's a separate, department. They have different functions. And then I'm really disappointed for the planning representative. If you force statement today and says that they have a conversation with me, I ask them, can we meet and you can talk to me? They are not responding. I never talked to any planning. I did talk to Mr. Chung in building department, okay? Yeah. That's a different department. They have different functions. I've submitted to you, as you can see the issue actually. This is a letter from from building department Chung, and then say that, we want to tell me you have objection to what I'm going to do. They wanted to, stop the final, all those things. So that's not the issue here we're talking about. We are asking for public record. Yes, I did ask information. Planning did not respond. They want to use the building's record. I've obtained it from Sunshine. And then as the record, actually what I'm asking is nothing to do with the building department's building permit, actually. That's totally different. They should not do that to me, actually. In front of you and just don't know anything and then says less than 10 page. I like to see that page. I think you should order them to give to me.
Okay, great. Thank you. No more questions from me. Member Stein.
I just have one more question for the respondent. Can you tell me what the search process was that the planning department undertook in response to the IDR request made by Ms. Zhang?
Do we need to unmute him?
Yes, we generally pull the files for the property address, and then we any email correspondence that are
Cutting out.
particular matter.
I'm sorry, could you repeat after you talked about pulling the files, how did you go about attempting to obtain the communication asked for here?
We approached the planner and asked the planner to provide any responding documents.
Did you ask the planner to look at their own communication by email or text or however they might have communicated their objections?
It would have been through their emails. There were no objections. There's just very limited correspondence on this matter. And I think what the petitioner is requesting aren't documents. They're not, we can't produce, she's asking why, and, those aren't documents.
Okay, and then, so are you saying, we don't have any response from you, so do you have any evidence of any emails or communication that you made with the petitioner to say that you were unable to?
Sure. We can provide for the full task force meeting. We can provide you exactly what we provided Ms. Sang and the date.
Yeah, I would recommend that you do that for the full task force meeting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think what he said today to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Only if we have a question, but I think we're done with
Okay.
questions. Let's figure out what we want to do here. Members, any ideas?
I mean, it sounds like he's saying that there was, while there was minimal communication, potentially documents, that there were also within that minimal documents some that he forwarded or that the department emailed to her, and she's saying that she did not receive them, which to me, without any other information, still sounds like a violation.
Based on the information we have here, I was going to suggest that violations be found and sent to the consent calendar, but I think this is complicated by the fact that we have no documented response from the planning department. And for that reason, I would be more inclined to send this to the full task force, see if they have a documented response by that time, and let the decision be made there. Because we're getting sort of two very different statements of fact. One is documented and one is undocumented. So
I would just add to that. It just seems like from the planning department, there are a lot of gaps in what actually happened. Like, it didn't seem like they necessarily, I don't really know. I don't get the sense that I'm hearing what search was performed and what documents were potentially located. And I would also want to learn more about that from potentially, it sounds as though someone else did this search and sending of documents.
I would also like to know, I would like to see a copy of what their response was.
Yes.
To the petitioner before making a final judgment. So my inclination right now would be to send this to the full task force to consider a 6725 and 6721 violation for not responding to records requests in a timely manner. To note that the planning department did not submit a written response to the complaint committee, but that we have asked them for one by the full task force meeting. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
The only question I'd have is, do we call it a recommendation, or do we just define the issue as you just said and say, let's have the full task force looked at it?
That was my question too, but honestly, I'm leaning toward recommendation.
I'd be leaning toward recommendation also, because we just don't, we don't have anything in front of us, and it was asked for, that says that they actually gave her something, anything, even if it said we don't have anything, that to me seems like it's strong enough for recommendation.
I would just say that that is what she said. We don't know what they did because we don't have that in the packet. So they're saying they sent something. So to me, it's more like, it's also that, in absence of having anything for us to look at as well, that it's a recommendation for violation. And maybe they produce it by then.
Yeah, and they still have this chance to show up and say, well, here it is. This is exactly what we gave. Yeah. And then we may be looking at a completely different case. But it seems like we need to hold people kind of accountable, even though we're moving faster through these things. I would be okay with either but I do like recommendation because we're not going as far as to put it on consent. It seems like a middle ground.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So who's moving?
I'm not moving, but I will second it.
Okay, so I'll move, Member Stein, I'll move that these are public documents under our jurisdiction and that we forward to the full task force with a recommendation to find a violation of 6725 for not responding to an IDR in a timely fashion and 6721 for not responding to a records request in a timely fashion. I also want to note that the planning department did not submit a written response or any documentation to the complaint committee at the time of this hearing. And that we've asked that they submit one before the full task force meeting.
While we have a little pause, this is Victor Young. I would like to note that upon confirmation with the chair, we would like to schedule this item on November the 6th for hearing.
My thoughts exactly.
I second.
Can I just get one question? But I don't want to interrupt the. I think you're still typing. Okay. Did you have order in there to order that those all responsive documents be produced?
I didn't put that in there. I actually wrote a version of that, but I thought since we were putting it to the full task force, and I could say we recommend that the task force order them to, I would say, respond directly with a statement that they do not have these documents or to produce the documents.
Yeah, I mean, it's your motion, but I thought we should be getting orders in these.
Okay, yeah. No, and I wrote that one. So
Finding of violations. Order follows that?
no, it can come last. What can follow that is, I guess the order can come next. Yeah, sorry. So the committee recommends that the task force order them to respond directly with a statement that they do not have these documents or to produce the documents. And then as long as there's a note that that the planning department did not submit a written response and they've been asked to submit one before the full SOTF meeting.
Okay, public comment.
Someone second that?
I seconded it, and I will again second it.
Okay, let's vote.
Item 6. Vice President.
Aye.
Vice President, Sugarman.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Item 7, final number. Is the mayor's office for alleged Sunshine Ordinance. 7.21, I believe responded about request to be found.
Okay, let's hear from the parties. Who do we have here? All right. So let's start when you're ready, Ms. Peterson. Let's start with the petitioner.
Mr. Petrolis, are you ready to read?
Hi. I want to get to my. Hi, this is Michael Petrellis. This matter involves texts that were reported by the SF Standard between Mayor Breed and a local billionaire named Gary Tan. I made a request to the mayor's office for any and all texts between the mayor and Gary Tan. And when I heard back from Hank Heckel, he said that they found no responsive records. It was a terse response, I think 2 sentences maximum from Hank Heckel, and he didn't explain how it could be reported that the word text between these two folks, but the mayor couldn't produce the texts. I wish to call to your attention, which is in the packet, a story from the missionlocal.com site, which broke the story that the mayor has been deleting texts. And I believe it's also that story that said she was given advice by the city attorney that there was a policy that for some odd reason allowed her to delete these public records of texts. So I'm contending that the texts did exist, and if they were destroyed, that is a serious violation of records retention law. And if they were not destroyed and they do exist, the records should be turned over to me. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Good evening, Chair Schmidt, Member Stein, Member Sugarman, Clerk Peterson. I'm Hank Heckel, Legal Compliance Officer in Mayor Breed's office, here to respond to Mr. Petrellis' complaint. Mr. Petrellis recited the facts to some degree. I'll just point out, I'll recap the timeline from our perspective. We received a request from Mr. Petrellis on September 9th, excuse me, September 9th. And it was related to any texts or other communications between Gary Tan and the mayor. We performed an inquiry to determine whether any such texts exist for production, and we responded in a timely fashion on September 19th and informed Mr. Petrellis of the results of that search, that inquiry, which was that we were not able to locate any responsive records, and we're not withholding anything. I'm not sure what the basis for the complaint is in terms of the Sunshine Ordinance violation. Mr. Petrellis cited 67.21 for failing to respond to a public records request in a timely and or complete manner. We did respond. We did our diligence, and we didn't find anything, and we informed him of that in a timely manner. And that's That's what happened, and therefore I would submit there was no violation since there was no failure to respond and there's no other sunshine section cited in the complaint, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, members, any questions on this one? I'll start with just a question for Mr. Heckel. You had in some involvement in responding and seeking out whether there were any responsive documents in this case, correct?
That's right.
Okay. So you personally, do you have any knowledge of any texts that would have been responsive, that would have involved Gary Tan, that had existed in the past but were deleted by anyone?
I do not.
Okay. And in terms of the search that was conducted for these texts, I'm gonna just surmise from just we've been here before on similar cases. I'm gonna surmise that the search involved a phone which is the mayor's personal phone. Is that's involved, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Is there any other device that would be searched for that purpose to see if there were any such texts?
No, I don't. I mean, there wouldn't be any other devices that were specific to the mayor that would be appropriate to search. I mean, there would be no other likely places to search.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's all the questions I have.
I don't have any.
No questions. Okay, then we can figure out what to do here. I know the time that we had two cases, and one involved the mayor, and the question was worded in a very, I'll call it, clever way. That was a Rosa L case.
Yes.
And then there was another one that was, it just went to the case that involved the city attorney's office.
Yes.
And that was a much more limited request. And so this looks a little more like that one.
Well, they were worded very differently. I wanted, before we start, are we supposed to move to rebuttals or anything or like that before?
No.
Okay, so their requests, I don't actually think it was even more limited with the city attorney from what I remember. It was that with Rosa L's cases, it had to do with the most recent text related to city business. And so like when I saw this case come up, sort of my first question was, I mean, were these texts even related to city business? Because you're dealing with someone who is under sunshine law and a party who potentially is not under sunshine law, right? Like unless they're discussing city business, right? So I wondered that. And then after hearing from Mr. Heckel, like I was actually surprised that they even, given that they even performed a search. But also, like in those recent cases, when we found her in violation, it was because this is my recollection, but that it was unfathomable that there was no text related to city business to produce whatsoever. So if that's the case, and we went through a whole bunch of scenarios about like whether she was getting a new phone, whether she was wiping her phone all the time. But if that's the case, if there's no text related to city business, I wouldn't really expect any even the recent past to be with this person that he's asking for text for to have surfaced anyway. So those are kind of like my overarching thoughts on this.
I don't know. I'm kind of confused myself a little about what to do with this case. On the one hand, it's asking for something, based on an assertion by somebody that they text the mayor. You don't really know if that assertion is true or not. We do know that the mayor has a retention policy that basically seems to allow her to delete all of her text communications that she considers non-government business by text. So this is I don't know that these texts would have existed. I don't know that they would have had anything to do with government business. We already know the mayor seems to be deleting all texts or not communicating text by text about government business. And we're already dealing with that from the Rosa L case. We've already kind of decided to move that forward to ethics and to raise that question. And I think we've done it with a case that was very strong because Rosa L is asking for any message, any recent message. But I feel like this is not very strong. We don't have any way to know that there would be text there. It seems like a much more vague kind of fishing expedition. So I'm just a little bit of a loss what to do with it.
Yes, and I was also, only from what I saw from the packet, it just said that the two were friends and did text each other. So I also thought that it could be a slightly stronger case if there were at least texts in a story, actual texts that were revealed that should have been, as there seemed to be in the last case as well. So
I'm with you all on this. Yes. I think that this one, we get cases where a request is made and a response comes back. We looked and there's nothing that exists. And it's not unfathomable. And we're kind of limited in what we can really say in that situation. And yes, we already have made a statement about that Rosa L case, and that doesn't have to. That's a different case than this one. Yeah. So I think this may be a case where we may recommend or put on a consent calendar as a we don't see a violation. I could see doing that.
and this is a little redundant, but I just think if it was to another city department, or if there was evidence that it was about city business, that would make this slightly.
There was a reason to believe there were particular texts about city business.
Yes.
Right now, we don't even have that.
Yeah, it's not Member Sugarman, great point about how this is communications with obviously someone who's in the news, but a completely private party. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're all on the same page. Anyone want to make the motion or a motion?
I can make a motion that we have jurisdiction, but that we find no violation. And forward the matter to the consent calendar.
Can we make that one on November 6th also?
And I forwarded the consent calendar for November 6th.
I'll second that.
We want to say, I'm sorry, Do we want to give like a little bit of reasoning behind that so that when the full task force looks at it, they know why we're recommending
Yes.
this recommendation?
So I make the motion that we have jurisdiction and that we find no violation for the reason of that we don't have evidence that the two parties have texted about city business, and in light of that, that one of the parties is a private party and not subject to the same rules under the Sunshine Ordinance.
Second agrees. Public comment? Okay, sure. Let's vote.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you to the parties. Thank you, Mr. Eckel.
And thank you to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petros. Good luck in your race.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
He's running for supervisor.
Sure. Yeah, let's do item 4.
Discuss roles in expansion. Sunshine Ordinance Task Force role. Just wait for notes. 0.
Okay, so this one I think I wrote on a napkin first before I put it in, but the thing that I wanted to do is I think that our committee at this point, we've sort of tried to do what hopefully is going to work, which is to make things more efficient and to reduce what we do in this committee by just, putting things through. And cases are going through pretty quickly. But I think there have been enough mentions of, well, what else can the task force do? And it seems to me that the mentions have happened, but maybe the challenge is to try to get a little more finite about ideas about what is the potential role of the task force and what can we do? I don't want to do things that are just do them because they can be done. I'm not trying to create some unnecessary bureaucracy, but I feel like within the wording of especially 67.30, there is there's some authority that we have that we're not using. And I think maybe we should get down to the business of either trying to get in there and figure out ideas to use that authority to do more than we're doing, or at least to say that, someone's looked at it and we think this could be done, that could be done, and leave it at that. But at least to have it explicit. And so I thought that can be sort of, we could totally reword what I'm saying, but I think that maybe that can be the thing that this committee can do so I'm going to leave this item on our agendas, in addition to the cases that we're seeing, because we do meet, we have a good committee, an excellent committee of people. And so that can be something where we can develop things, and then we just, if we feel like it's ready, we put it in front of the task force and say, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And so that's what I wanted to introduce. And I believe that one example is the example that we spoke about earlier, which is that I think that this task force may be very confused about what its actual extent of jurisdiction might be. And the example came up in the case that was withdrawn, because I think that if we're going to say that we don't have jurisdiction over things, I think there has to be some kind of a standard that someone can point to in the law. And I haven't seen it. And I know that we had a series of communications from our city attorneys. I think that City Attorney Shapiro did an admirable job of trying to give us some guidance on this. But ultimately, I'm not quite sure if I'm convinced that the question that was put to our city attorney was actually answered. And that's something that I think might even be, if we look at, okay, what can the task force do under 6730? One thing that it wasn't being done that we're now doing is 95%, because of Vice Chair Stein, we now have the annual report. And I think in that can also be more than it is, but the things that are in the annual report now can be significant. It's in the public record. And I think that putting things in the public record is something that adds to the decisions we make on cases. So that's an example of expanding based on what the 6730 powers might give us. But I think that question of jurisdiction is sort of like hand in glove here, because we're talking about what are our limits? What are our limits? And I think that maybe we find that, we're hitting the limit. And it might be that I'm like just ignoring something that's out there that's obvious in terms of what is the limitation on our jurisdiction. But when we do get down to it, I think that we would be looking at 6721 to figure out what exactly that limit may be on our jurisdiction. So that's what I want to put before us. I don't necessarily need anything specific from you all, because I didn't give you anything specific. I just gave you this sentence, which is, what is he talking about? But there we go. I think that I'm hoping to develop some concrete ideas. Not looking for necessarily just like spitballing, because spitballing to me is what you do not while we're in the committee, but you do it before you get here. We can do that. That's okay. But I think that I'm hoping for something more than that to happen here, which is, can we develop one or two or three items that we think the task force could do that would add to its value. That's all for now. I don't, it doesn't matter to me.
I think we could hear it. I mean, are our meetings always at 5:30 p.m.? They are, right? Because
5:30.
yeah, so I feel like, that's a good time for the petitioners to be here. And they're usually, especially in our more recent months, they're efficient. We have time after we hear their cases to discuss this, and we can discuss it then. Right where you said we could discuss it, which was after the cases, but before announcements. That sounds kind of appropriate.
That's fine with me.
I just had one question, and I feel like I heard it from the member who also came in after me. It's the same question I asked myself, which is what do we affect? That was probably my first question coming in. I think I asked it to member Stein when I first joined. It's like, what influence does this task force have in the first place? And I guess having been here as much time as I have, I sort of see, it affects a certain body of people typically, not in the government, but I mean also a certain number of interested parties, a small number of interested parties often. But I can see where it affects, both those parties and bringing the cases and the government bodies who are responding to them. So my question sort of is a similar one, where do you think we could be? Are we not being as effective as we can be, or where do you think we can be more effective? Other than the jurisdiction one, which I agree with you, by the way, would be an interesting exploration.
Yeah. I don't have a great answer myself for that. I think that one vehicle that we should be looking at, and I know that Vice Chair Stein had ideas about what we could have also done with the annual report, but maybe it would have helped, to have more of a broad participation in that. And so, anything we come up with, it's got to be that people buy in. Otherwise, let's not, I don't know if we should bother doing it. I mean, anything we recommend, we're putting work on ourselves. So that's one reason why I don't want to create things that are just, officious. But in terms of sort of effect and impact, I think, Member Stein might be a better judge of that than I would be. And to me, the signs that this task force has any effect are subtle. They're not obvious. And there's a lot of signs that hit me in the face, that tell me, what are you doing here? What, is anyone listening? But on the other hand, there's sort of a stream of indications to me that the things that we do and the decisions that we make actually are changing things. I think one thing that I am going to bring in here is something that I would want to talk with you about, which is that the president of the Society of Professional Journalists, he and I have talked about like trying to have a better sort of direct propagation of things that are happening here to go out so that the press can sort of like work off of what happens in here, decisions that are made in here, and to make sure that there's a, I don't know if it's more broadcasting of it or if it's just that there be some pushing it out. I'm not sure what exactly that would look like, but maybe that it'd be just more clear that you know these things that we're putting out there can impact what's available to the press. I don't know.
Well, we should definitely involve Member LaHood in that conversation. I personally have never been involved in SPJ. I certainly used to be more involved in just basically the local community of journalists here. But I wouldn't say that we have, frankly, a listserv for information like this. And honestly, at least in a former life, when I wasn't an arts journalist, it would have been very helpful to know half the things that I have learned coming in here when it comes to making public records requests, because you certainly have to deal with government. I mean, in most local news operations, of which I worked for many, many years in, you have to deal with many records requests on a daily basis to these departments. And there is no like, just there generally is not a newsroom explainer saying, well, this is what you're entitled to get for information. And when I came in here in 2018, originally, when I first, was interested in the Sunshine Force, the conversation, I was actually for an SPJ position. The conversation I had with the force at the time was how much we did use public records requests like the Brown Act and also courts records requests, which operate under basically a different rule book, essentially, than what we evaluate here. But that was only, again, based on my own experience in a different newsroom. So certainly, I do think that it would be a benefit to many journalists here. But I don't, given my own experience, I've never actually been involved in SPJ. I don't think that, I think that a large number of journalists here would probably say the same, honestly. So I would wonder, there's got to be some other way that's worth.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to put something forth that is sort of channeled through the SPJ.
Yeah.
I've mainly just
No, it's a good
they're
idea.
the ones who nominated me. I had this conversation with the president, and we've got this idea that maybe the linkage between the task force and the press in general is too attenuated.
I think it's a good idea.
And that could be done in 1,000 different ways. That maybe, like you say, listserv. I don't do anything with listserv.
No, I think that probably, I mean, and I only have because I want to only make a couple, I know that Member Stein also has some things to say. I just want to make a couple brief comments, but I think that probably the more direct approach would be, I don't really think it would be that hard to have a list of editors that work in the Bay Area and San Francisco specifically, who you could just reach out to and tell them that you would like to send, could you please send this to your reporters so that they know? I think that's probably an easier route. We do have more agencies that I tend to be aware of, but it's still in my mind a very small group of people, so it's like it wouldn't be too hard to like find them and reach out to them. I just wanted to say also, it does, like we make recommendations that are not necessarily followed by the agencies that we make them for. We find them in violation. I don't know how much I should say, but in my experience talking to those agencies, generally in life, I have heard often that we are a thorn in their side. And I take that as a way of I feel as though the effect is not subtle, that they do see us and they take those evaluations seriously. And often in my experience in those conversations, and again, this is anecdotally, but they say, they weren't aware of the rules, which for me, even though it's like kind of a harsh, reminder that these are the rules, at least we are there to be the body that does have that. So personally, I think that, there is an effect that I see. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
Member Stein.
No, I like this idea. I think it's tricky. I guess I'll start with where you guys were about having more of a linkage to the press. I think it's hard because we don't really have the resources to do a press release or something like that. And also I think our position as a board within San Francisco makes me wonder, I don't know, what our role would be in that capacity, in terms of giving stories or conveying certain kinds of information. But I'll just say I definitely have many times thought, the certain cases that we've heard, oh, this would be a great thing for a newspaper to look at. But I'm not sure that it's my role to tell the newspapers or organize that information for the newspapers or whatever. We did talk at one point, I think I was the one who brought it up, and then I realized, gosh, I'd have to be the one who did it, and I didn't want to take it on, having a Twitter account, right? That could just say, we heard this case, which was about this. We heard this case, which was about this. And one or two interesting lines, so that if somebody did want to pick it up, they could then go and reference that case and see what happened there and all of that. But that just seems too resource intensive. So I don't know the answer to that, but I will just say I've often, I feel like we do certain things, and I'm very happy when I see it show up in the press. And I think it was a story that should have shown up in the press, but I don't know what our role in that exactly can be, given our resources and our position sort of as a sort of government, as a board or task force of the city of San Francisco. I'll just want to say too, I feel like I did want to follow up with you, Member Schmidt, about if you have specific ideas about how the annual report can be more than it is. Because at this point I'm thinking about, I want to try to make it a kind of boilerplate version this year, and just in terms of the statistics that we're collecting, so that for every section, the statistics can be laid out in exactly the same way, maybe even more succinctly. And then if people want going forward want to compare, how has it changed over 5 years, 10 years, they can just kind of look at oh, the amount of time it's taken to turn around a case has gone down or up or whatever it is, but trying to kind of make that more streamlined and easy. But I'm totally open to thinking about other things that could be then incorporated into the annual report. And I know originally there were many things were thrown out there, but it was an issue of how labor intensive it was going to be and who was actually helping work on it, right? But I will say, and this kind of is related again to what we're talking about, the first annual report that I did, I was really surprised at how many city respondents within different city departments reached out to me and were really eager to talk about what their experience had been with the task force, the things that they were confused about, the things that they felt like could be done better, give me their input. They've asked us to come to some of their kind of ad hoc meetings to just hear what they're doing, because some of them have formed a group to try to make better presentations in front of the task force. And I do think we have a vested interest in getting their point of view potentially helping them make better presentations. Of
Yeah.
course, not being co-opted by them in any way, but at least getting that information because they're half of the parties who come before us and they're having particular experiences. And many of them reached out to me and said, we really wish we had more guidance. I think we've given them some guidance with the stuff that our former member put together that asks for specific things in the response. But I think some of them still feel like the sunshine training they get is not quite enough. So kind of doing that educational or best practices work with respondents, I think is important. For instance, it has come up over and over again, like perhaps asking every department to make sure there's someone who's designated to receive requests when people go on vacation, especially in light of IDRs and all that kind of stuff. That was an idea that kind of came from respondents that I talked to, and people just not realizing that, gosh, if I go out of town for a week and somebody just happens to throw an IDR into my mailbox, I'm immediately in violation because I didn't, think about or plan for this happening. And that currently is a burden that every employee in the city faces because every employee could get a request. So I feel like doing stuff that's around education with the respondents and getting feedback from the respondents, it was kind of, again, I don't think we have the resources necessarily, but just even having like interviews with some more respondents about what their situation has been and what they need from us to be able to respond better or to fulfill requests better. And then I also just have this point of view, I guess, because I did study the Right to Information Act in India for a couple of years. And, while I was in India, and one of the things that really struck me there was that every day you open the newspaper in India, and at least on the front page, whatever newspaper it is, there's at least 2 or 3 stories that are sourced through right to information requests, not even ones that came from reporters, ones that might have come from a citizen who then handed it to a reporter. And there was so much, the right to information in India was like a bottom-up law that really came from the people kind of, aware of what was going on kind of in the world, that many countries were passing right to information laws, but it was a citizens movement to have a right to information law, I think, because of the various kinds of abuses they experienced from their governments, not providing services, not even providing information about like what documents you needed to get services. And so there was an incredible kind of amount of organizing around helping people understand the value of a right to information. And you could go to some rural village and the peasant farmer knew that he had a right to information, and he might have even made right to information requests to his local office. And I feel like there could be a very important role for the task force in, as I've kind of said before, in just education of citizens groups, whatever, nonprofits, whoever is out there that might want to make right or public information requests, to do like a little bit of outreach to them, maybe go make a presentation, something like that. And I would love to hear like what people's ideas are for education and outreach. We have an education and outreach committee. I don't think I've ever heard a report from them about what they've done or know if they even have something that kind of is on their agenda. So I was just thinking, like, I don't want to also create too much burden on anybody, but I think it would be nice, maybe even in the task force meetings, to have every so often or maybe every month, just very brief reports from the different committees about what they are doing, so that we could begin to get a handle on how they're thinking about what's coming under their scope, and maybe making some decisions as a whole in the task force about what we think these committees could be pursuing, right? And I would just love to see more work done around education and outreach, and have it be something that everyone in the city knew how to use. And I also kind of agree with both of you. Like, I do think it's not a perfect impact. It's not like our authority is absolute or anything, but I think it offers people enormous leverage. And I'm most happy when I see like a diversity of people using that tool for whatever their purposes are. I do think we have a problem with sort of a few people monopolizing the system, and I think we need to work out our system so that that doesn't happen. But maybe as we get our backlog down, it'll sort of not become such an issue anymore. But even if it wasn't an issue, I still would like to see more people from, more diverse backgrounds and interests being able to use this law. That's all.
I wanted to add like one thing that I had forgotten, just what you had said about spitballing in item 4 generally and about 6730 is that the change that you introduced and then we helped make about moving more items to the consent agenda and making determinations at complaint committee. I found that very helpful and satisfying and something that I was grateful to be part of, coming into the complaint committee. And so I don't know what this item will become, but the idea of having something on the agenda where we're still advancing the ball past to whatever the next thing is.
Okay.
I think that's
Yeah.
a good idea, is to have something that's past, coming in and hearing the complaints and doing our typical, is having some sort of policy in mind to help the Sunshine Task Force improve. I think is a good idea to keep discussing every month.
Okay, good. Yeah. The way mine works, I have these things that they're so like nebulous and I have no idea how to solve this problem. And so I'll just sort of like leave it out in space. I had to like kind of put it down in front of me and say, okay, I got to figure out why is it that this problem is not being solved by me. And I had to like just sort of like look at it and try to figure out. And I think that we have had conversations about, things that we can do, et cetera, but it's always kind of left at the, oh yeah, that would be great, and and that's, I'm not criticizing anyone when I say that. It's very important to do the spitballing. It's very important to come up with ideas. One of our problems here is that we are unpaid and we have limited time. And so anything that we think we would add means we're asking someone to do it. And it's that attachment, like, okay, so we're going to add this. Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
And that's like a classic challenge that, has never been resolved. So I don't even know if it necessarily is limited to added tasks. It could be, like maybe we had, this is just like the kind of thing that I'm thinking about. What if we have like an order and then we have an automatic process where it gets like sent to some, like sent to what's that service that Anonymous was on. He used this thing that, and then all the reporters would pull things off of. Like some we would institute like an automatic thing, so it's not like a labor-intensive thing at all, or some other. If we can make a change and it doesn't necessarily add work for us. Some of these ideas would be add work to our own plate. So we have to really keep that in mind. Other ones might be simply, are we not letting a certain process happen that may be either, it may be that just no one started doing it before, or maybe because technology has changed things and maybe we're behind, and so it could be that these are things that could be, if we just get something in place, it'll operate itself. It'll run itself kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I'm thinking about that as you say it. I was realizing another gap that I think could be important to look at, and this could be something that we think about for addressing in the annual report. It's really right now, there's no real data on compliance. So like once we make an order, the compliance and amendments committee doesn't really track whether a petitioner then got their information when we ordered that it be given. I mean, sometimes they know, sometimes they don't, but there's no real process for tracking it. And I feel like this is a big omission in what we know. And it would be really useful to know, are people complying or not?
What happens when we send something to compliance for like monitoring, which we do?
And they kind of work with the respondent and they kind of, keep going at it, trying to get the documentation, but then, I don't know, at some point, they just don't track like whether it was provided or not.
And there's no,
And people don't seem to go at it forever. I mean, sometimes if they do go at it to the end and it really doesn't come through and they take it all the way, it could end up as like an ethics referral or something like that, that I think a lot of petitioners probably give up before that. Don't take it all the way to the end that way.
and there's no report other than like the minutes from the compliance meetings, right?
There are minutes from the compliance meetings, but they're not tracking. They're not tracking compliance in any kind of systematic way. And I feel like that would tell us a lot. Like if we're, repeatedly asking, like the police department for documents. And, I realize now because they actually did respond to our last survey that they, say they get like 50,000 requests for information a year. I think a lot of that is for stuff that they have to give. It's just done through this automated system, arrest reports or whatever it might be. I don't know what it is for their actual, requests that kind of fall outside of certain kinds of standard documents that people can request from them. But we don't really know, like they come before us a lot and then we make our decisions and we don't really know, did they give that information in the end or did they not? And it would be good to know. And, we did talk originally when we were doing the report and we kind of opted against it for a variety of reasons. But we did talk about, yes, there could be a name and shame kind of portion of the annual report where you say, we ordered these 10 things to be, these 10 cases for so-and-so to release this information. They did not, and have that there in the report, and that I think would also put a little more pressure. But that's also a decision to be made, right? Because you're also trying to work with them in a variety of ways to get them to do, to give information to people. And you don't necessarily want to go the adversarial kind of route first. But
So it sounds like there's jurisdiction and also outreach and then compliance are like the three that I've heard. And I would say something that you said about adding something and then who's going to take it. I think that that's true, and also why when I heard the Twitter suggestion that doesn't sound tenable. But I also think it depends on the request because there's plenty that I have not wanted to take on, for example. But outreach to newsrooms, I mean, that's something that if you need help with, I feel like that's something that I could also just talk to Member LaHood about as well. And we like I said, when I said editors, I should be more specific. I meant more like directors of newsrooms, like the editors in chief, people who are talking to their reporters en masse. And like I said, I think that that's something that's doable and worth doing.
Yeah, and I'm not in the press, and I don't know if this is just completely irrelevant, but if there were some way in which we can make processes better for the media, I'm all for it. And if the press has ideas that they want to give to us, then we want to make it so that they can. I don't know if there's any obstacles to that right now. So, but if you both are members of the press, you and Member LaHood. So, maybe there's a whole level that I have no concept of, like ideas about what could be done here or communicated out from here and it would be like good for certain people.
Well, she mentioned it probably like maybe a few months after I had joined, or maybe a couple months. But she talked. We had a discussion at some point at the full meeting about IDR and like the turnaround for public records requests. It was absolutely accurate that basically if you have to wait for a certain amount of time, by the time it gets to the Sunshine Force, for example, it's no longer something that you feasibly, unless you are working for a specific investigative shop. And even then, it's not really feasible for you to make a records request unless it's something that you have authorization from an editor to turn around on a longer time frame. So I don't necessarily think that there's a way to potentially make us that much more effective in that scenario. But I do think that, as I was saying earlier, there's certainly plenty of people who have been in my position who don't know what their rights are for public records and are not using the system or the Sunshine Force or other public records laws in a way where they are rightfully invoking them to these agencies and saying, "Hey, give this to me in a certain amount of time." And I think that is education that's worth giving to newsrooms. But that's maybe just because I didn't know it, and maybe they do. But that's where I stand with it.
I will just say there was also one respondent from a department who was very gung-ho Sunshine, who reached out to me and said, "You guys should have a video like on your website about how to make a records request." I don't know, that might be like a lot too, but I feel like outreach to journalists and then outreach to citizens groups, community groups, whatever, I think should be I mean, if that does take work, but that's the kind of thing like I'd be willing to go and speak, if we had like just a little succinct 15-minute thing, or even somebody was willing to make like a little talking video or something. It doesn't have to be high tech. That could be useful, although we don't really have a website.
Yeah,
but
you do.
We mean not really.
Yeah.
I think at some point we're supposed to have like some kind of turnover to some kind of new system, and maybe there'll be a capacity for video.
I think it could be done on our current website. Not like, where we embed a video and people are like, "Oh, here's this great presentation," but certainly something where you can just put a link that goes to some other place that we uploaded it and says, "If you need more information, this is this here," which of course requires our creation of an account and discussion about that, like everything that's layered on top of that. But I use our website and I realize it's very lacking in many ways, but like I do use it to look up minutes and to like.
Yeah, no, I do too, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have video capable for us, that we have much, data.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it would support stuff like that. I agree.
Okay. Good. I don't think I have anything else, and I don't need anything from you guys right now. But I do think that that's kind of what I was hoping for, is to just sort of. None of it sounds like automatic or easy. It all is original thinking, because this is not. This wheel has never been invented before. And I know people have thought about this stuff before, but it seems like since we may have some time, let's figure out how could we, actually like use it well. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Oh yeah.
All right, we can move on to the next item.
Oh,
Do we have to take public comment?
Oh, public comment. Yeah.
guess this is-
Has anyone for the public survived this long? Okay. Okay, next item.
8, announcements, comments, questions, and
Yeah, no meeting of us next month.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No meeting at all. I thought there was a shorter meeting.
No, that there was talk about some kind of combo in January. Yeah.
So this is the November 6th canceled?
No.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah, our this committee.
20th? Okay.
Nothing else for me.
Item 9.
Okay, let's go. Move to adjourn.